Our keynote speaker is going to be talking about the razor-thin margins that, unfortunately, the transportation and logistics sectors do have a reputation for. But electrification actually offers a fantastic opportunity to not just reduce carbon footprint, obviously, but also to, in fact, boost those margins. Our speaker is going to share insights on how intelligent software can make that happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a warm welcome for the Global Product Manager for Siemens eMobility, Siemens Smart Infrastructure, Smaran Subaya. Welcome.
All right. I know we are dealing with this post-lunch energy slump. I know. If you droop your eyes a little bit, I will not take it personally, okay? But hopefully my presentation is going to keep you awake, like a double shot espresso, and let's get started. Commercial fleet electrification is urgent, right? If you look at the overall population of vehicles in Europe, around 2% of those vehicles are heavy-duty vehicles, like buses, trucks. But they contribute almost around 27% of CO2 emissions. If road transport was its own country, it would be like the 6th largest emitter in EU. And it is like 4 times more CO2 emissions than all of the internal EU flights. And then now you understand why it is such a critical thing for us to get on fleet electrification. So how do we get started, right? If you look at the transportation companies coming out of COVID, it was really excellent for them because there was a big boost to supply chain. They're flush with cash. But when we look at the average of overall revenues, and this is actually coming from McKinsey, they took the top 20 forwarders with publicly available data, and then you compare them. If you take the net revenue and then the cost of sales, when it comes to EBIT, it's almost nothing, 1 to 11%. And now you're forcing these companies to, let's say, buy new vehicles. Fancy electric vehicles are there, fancy hydrogen vehicles are there, and now you tell them, there's an exciting technology, let's get on started. And then you say, have you looked at this picture? If I have to give my investors the return on invest, where do these profits come from? Where do I have the potential for doing this? And that's why we look at how we can help these companies get on this journey of electrification. And we start with the vehicles themselves. And colleagues from MAN were here, from Volvo Trucks were here. And if you look at their website, you will see that there are trucks on the market today available for every segment there is, from distribution to even long haul and cement mixers. So you see there are electric trucks already available for every segment there is. And when you look at the total cost of ownerships, when you compare with diesel vehicles here, and specifically in the last mile segment, you see that in every city of Europe, they're already at parity with diesel. And that comes with purchase subsidies, obviously. And we are seeing how subsidies can help these companies get started with electrification. And that's a key element, I think, that will still be needed in the near term until we all can get that momentum get started. When you look at the price, when we compared, this was in 2022, this is a study by ICCT, and you see that even with electricity prices in 2021, and the total operations are already at parity in cities like Amsterdam. So you see there is already technology available for companies to get started on this journey, and it is also better than ICE in many cases, especially in the last mile. When you talk about last mile business in specific, this is where the biggest cost of transportation is. In terms of when you look at distribution, especially with e-commerce, it becomes even more, that this business is having the highest cost in this last mile. Let's talk about charging infrastructure for that matter. And here, this is again outlook for 2040 in Germany. Where will all of these trucks charge? right? It is predicted around 1.2 million electric trucks will be available, over 700,000 charge points will be needed, and the majority of the use case will be private depot charging. And this is almost 60% in Germany. When you compare it in the US, it's actually 91% in the US. 91% of the charging use cases in US will be private depot charging. Right, and then we see a higher percentage with almost what we call as public shared depots, which are overnight depots, and these will be around 35%. And the last layer, which we talked about in terms of megawatt charging or long-haul trucks, that will be just 6% of the cases. So we have the technology now with CCS available, which is sufficient for all of the use cases that are there in majority of the cases. Right? And private depots will still continue to be the primary charging use case. So now we looked at vehicles, we talked about charging infrastructure, then finally comes how will all of this be put together. And this is where critical digital solutions come into play, and this is where they help to optimize overall depot operations. And we have heard in every segment we talked about how load management can help reduce the capital expenditure necessary to install. Right? You have less grid power available. How can we optimize the installation capacity for a site based on your typical day-to-day usage? Right? Because we have predictable operations in terms of fleet operations. They go on predictable routes, and it is very easy for an operator to plan around those predictable routes. And this is where smart charging, load management helps. And I will not talk about this because we have heard from other keynote speakers already, but there are some other use cases that are really interesting in this segment, and I will focus on those. The first one I want to talk about is shared depots. The idea behind shared depots is that when a bus company or a truck company is setting up the depot for their own operations, it also makes very much sense for them to look at utilization of these assets, not only for their own operations, but how can they look at monetizing these assets with higher utilization. So this was in one of our discussions with the CEO. He said, during the day, my depot is almost empty. Right? I would like to utilize this for, let's say, third-party fleet operators, like a taxi company, for example. Would that be possible? And why do they want to do this? Obviously, it makes sense for them. There is a lot of money that they put in to set up this infrastructure, and they want to make best use of it. So they can do early return on invest. But there is another incentive that is coming up from subsidies. So here, for example, I want to take Navy in the US. And this program is actually, when we talk about Navy, it is always about public charging. But also, it makes sense in the context of a logistics operator, because if you read it clearly, it says these funds are also available for authorized commercial motor vehicles operators of more than one company. So if you open up your depot to more than yourself, to another company, then you are also eligible for these Navy funds. A typical power usage in a real depot looks like this, and this is one of our real customers. He has around 300 charge points. And if you look at a typical operation around this depot, you see how the usage patterns are. Right? You see that when the vehicles come back around 8 o'clock at night, and they charge throughout the night, and then early morning, 4 o'clock, it's done. And there are small bits and pieces during the day where there are some charging sessions, but there is a lot of potential where these assets could be put to use. And this is where a digital software can help in assessing what are the available times, at what times can this depot be put to operational for external fleets, for third-party fleets, identify that, give that as suggestions to customers, and then the customers can open up their depot to private operators to then utilize this. What is the impact? We see that on average, there is just 37% of usage, right, which can be boosted up. And yesterday, you heard from the colleague from McKinsey, where he said already if you look at public CPO operators, just by boosting their utilization 2-3 percentage point, they can reduce the return on invest almost by 10%. And this is, again, a potential for them to utilize the existing capacity so that they can boost their revenues forward. By looking at average cost, just by taking a 15 cent per kilowatt hour as a price margin, we have seen that they can improve their return on invest by almost 10%. And this is an exciting opportunity, which I think is more promising than if we look at megawatt charging in the case of long haul. We'll look at companies that will set up charging hubs for themselves, and they will make it also available for other players because there is spare capacity available. Another example that is also interesting is look at profitability improvement by running more electric miles. So here, the basic understanding is that coming out of the COVID, we have seen that shippers and forwarders are being pushed also to reduce their scope 3 emissions, right? One example is already in Germany, there is a regulation which is coming into place which forces companies to think also about scope 3 emissions. And then all of these companies have set themselves good benchmarks of saying we want to improve our sustainability, and that's why we have put an ambitious vehicle electrification plan, and then we want to move to almost CO2 neutral operations. So if every company is going forward for this, it means that they are also happy to pay higher per mile rates for transporting goods. We already know that electric vehicles have better total cost of ownership, which means they are better than their ICE variants in terms of operating costs. And this will then help them to drive financial benefit because every additional electric mile that is running is pure money. A simple operation in a depot would be for a fleet manager to assign a vehicle goes on a specific route. What we did was we looked at a typical operation, and here is a sample of visualization of that. So the colored blocks are typical routes, right? And the empty blocks are where there is a charging plan that is generated, right? When we looked at this simple operation of assigning a vehicle to a specific route, and when this was done manually by fleet operators based on their knowledge, based on their experience, versus when it was done by a software. This is a mathematical optimization problem, and computers are really, really good at it, right? When given such a combinatorial problem, I have X vehicles, I have X type of routes, I need to find out the best match. Computers are very good at doing this. And when in this specific example, we saw that almost 20% increase in daily driven electric miles. So our software was able to allocate vehicles to routes in such a way that there was no operational risk, but actually increase the daily driven kilometers. And when you look at each electric vehicle being almost 39% cheaper, and this is pure money on the table. And we see using software can actually help fleet operators improve their operational excellence, right, by doing the right thing when they use digital tools. And now we saw two examples already. One was with sharing the depot. The other one is with better allocation of vehicles to routes. But this is still too much of an ask for a fleet operator to, right? Because it means then he still has to go through the risk of buying the vehicles, setting up the charging infrastructure, and running all of these operations on his own. And more and more operators are asking for peace of mind. They're saying, how can I have a low-touch effort? And with this is why we have also a new business model which Siemens, along with our partner Volta Trucks, have launched. We call it Truck as a Service. It's a total different way of approaching this opportunity. We say, if operators are asking for peace of mind, we can provide you that. It minimizes all of the risks that you have with new technology like vehicles. And specifically, our partner vehicle here, Volta Zero, it's already running around in several European cities. This was designed ground up for, designed for distribution use cases. And here you see that the driver has a real 360-degree view, so it's easy for him to, navigate small roads and cities, and he can see pedestrians. So there is safety, and it also introduces excitement for drivers. And if you ask any fleet operator, he will tell the biggest challenge that he has today is attracting drivers and retaining those drivers to be running for their business. So electrification in this model, what we are approaching here together with our partner is that Siemens is then providing the necessary backend in terms of operating the entire depot, the setting of it, the planning, the running, and all of that you get for a simple monthly fee. And that is a low-touch, low technical know-how from a customer point of view, but still you get the benefit of electrification so that we can overall speed this business up. So you see how we are enabling customers to get on this journey, right? Remove all the barriers to electrification, look at the challenges that they face, and how do we drive them towards this in a much faster approach. And we are doing this at scale around the globe. So giving you here 3 examples here. So one is a bus depot in UK, where we are managing the entire charging operations for this customer. We have performance contracts there so that we can deliver them reliable charging infrastructure. Similarly, we have in the truck use case with Coca-Cola, and finally the last one being the US Postal Services in the US, where we are looking at electrifying the biggest fleet of, biggest commercial fleet there is in the world. With this, thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And once again, we open the floor here in person for anybody's questions. You just raise your hand, or if you prefer, or if you are with us online, then you can send in the question via the app. So maybe we can start out just looking around the room. If anybody has a quick question, is that a wave or an arm? Is that like just, no, okay. Yep, there's a gentleman right over there.
Thank you. Thank you for this interesting insights. My name is Robin van den Berg. I'm from Bridgestone Mobility Solutions. I was intrigued by your position basically to help fleets also with their planning and their depot management, etc. But I also realized that a lot of fleets are taking electrification a bit step by step and are not just replacing all their vehicles at once. So how would you see Siemens helping, let's say, with mixed fleet scenarios, doing the planning for both combustion engine vehicles and electric?
Okay, so what we have learned is this. Yes, this is a journey, right? So when you have like 3 trucks, then you don't really need so much planning to be done in general. So what we are seeing is that with typical operations, our customers know best how to run their operations. When we introduce new technology, and this is where they need a helping hand. So we see at the moment that several customers are looking at this as a learning journey, right? And then they're happy to operate 2 separate systems, let's say. But you're absolutely right that going forward, this is not going to be a sustainable way where they say, okay, I come to Siemens for my electric vehicles, and then for my general diesel vehicles, I go to another system, right? So it needs to be an integrated play in that sense that all of the IT ecosystem that is his primary working space, those need to work together. And this we do it from a design approach in the sense that the systems that we have built is from an API first principle, in the sense that you can integrate with their current transport management system or their current driver management system and so on. So that is how we are approaching it, saying that we are one among the tools that you will use, and we are not positioning ourselves as the tool for them.
Thank you very much for that. Why don't we just take a question from the app? We have one, yeah. Who do you see as the winners long-term on the commercial vehicle charging market? Auto OEMs such as Volvo, traditional OEMs like Siemens, ABB, energy utilities, O&G players? Or will we see a fragmented market with specialized players bringing best to the table, similar to Volta Trucks and Siemens example?
Everybody wants to be a winner, isn't it, right? But I think we are not looking at it from a perspective of saying we are here to win this. Yes, if it happens eventually, good. But I think in the short to mid-term, this will be an ecosystem play, right? It will be that how can we together as an ecosystem help our customers bridge that gap. If you don't do this, then we all will be losers. And I think that is key here, that the commercial vehicle market is at it's taking up. If you look at that hockey stick, we are at that inflection point, I think. And just today, there was a ICCT report that said, if you compare from last year to this year, almost electric vehicle sales in Europe have tripled. And it's only going to pick up. So I see this as an opportunity for the ecosystem to come together and say, how can we make it frictionless? How can we make it very easy for our customers to adopt electrification?
Thank you very much. Any questions in the room now? We can have a look. Maybe some people are too embarrassed to ask this question, Smaran, but how profitable can opening up of a depot be to fleet operators?
Actually, it is really profitable because the primary principle is that a depot operator is running this for his own operations. He has set it up not for making money, but to run his day-to-day business. And if you see there is an opportunity based on his daily routes, daily vehicles that he has, he sees there is a blank space that he can monetize on. And what we have seen from examples is that it actually reduces the overall return on invest almost by 2-3 years. And that's substantial, right? Because the initial capital invest that he has put is huge. And if he can reduce it by 3 years, then it's just money-making machine.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from our audience? So maybe I'll ask one more question, or maybe you can just sort of sum up for us. What do you still see as the biggest challenge that fleet operators face when they think about electrifying their depots, and how can you help?
I think still there is this whole barrier with range anxiety, right? So I think it comes from individual personal life, right? Everybody thinks that, okay, what if I get stranded? And I think that scare is still hindering people from moving on to this new journey. And time and again, when you talk to transport companies, they say, battery electric trucks, it is coming in the future. It's in the future, right? And unless they see examples of real customers using it in real daily life, and they see that they are making money with it, and there's not really an incentive to go forward. And here I think we should look at on the other side of the pond, where NACFE, or National Council on Freight Efficiency, they are running the series called Run on Less. And if you're, you can look it up, it's called runonless.com, and you see real concrete examples of fleets like PepsiCo, like OK Produce. They're showing their experience and explaining that we are running this, and it is much more efficient than ICE vehicles. And it's much more efficient, it's attractive for our drivers, and we are able to retain those drivers. And when fleet operators see that, then they will actually learn about how easy it is. Yeah, but they also went through these challenges, and I think as the market matures, as the technology matures, and it's going to get as seamless as possible.
And what could be some incentives?
So I think here governments have to play a big role, right? So we see the IRA funding, which was there in the Biden administration, has really pushed a lot. And also there are state governments like California, which mandated that you have to have electric vehicles by 2025 and so on. And so these are, let's say, promoters, right? They nudge fleet operators towards electrification. But on the other side, like we talked about, if you have to really reach TCO parity, then you need purchase subsidies. And these subsidies actually help them to get on board. And even on here, we see recently Austria, around 30 million subsidies were announced for electrification in trucks. So it's happening. It's happening now. And it's an exciting business to be in.
Any other questions from the floor? Yep, we have one gentleman here.
Thanks. Yeah, I take on the mic. I am Hauke from iDynamics. We are an energy software startup for fleets on depots. And you talk about a lot about the operational excellence. And my main question is, how do you make sure that the software really execute execute live at the customer depot? Because we talk a lot about planning and the transition, but the execution is quite difficult in my point of view to make it happen and to integrate all the data. So yeah, what is your way to do that today and maybe tomorrow or in 2 days?
So yes, you have put a nice point here, right? So I mean, we talked about, we talk a lot about Internet of Things, or some people call it Internet of Broken Things, right? So we have chargers, we have vehicles. So these are all IoT devices in themselves. And the best way when data comes together is when we can really put it into use, right? And that's what I said. Computers are good at optimizing things, and as long as you can get the right data into the right systems, then you're able to run it. So we are doing it operationally, right? So it's not that something that we planned and then we leave it for the customer to execute. So it's an operational system in itself, where the planning helps the operations, and at the same time the operations give feedback to the next day's planning. So it's an integrated system in that sense, that where the planning drives the operational day, and the operational day also drives the next day planning in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Hello? Okay, yes, it's live. Yeah, the question or the next step is, how do you make sure that you're able to integrate all the data? Because there are already plenty of systems running and plenty of APIs you need to integrate, several chargers, several vehicles. So it's, yeah, the complexity is here really interesting. How do you solve that?
Yes, it is complex. I'm not denying that it's everybody can do this, right? So the way we are approaching is this, as I told already, is by going in an API first way, right? So we are very open in the sense, starting from the chargers. We are not just Siemens chargers are compatible with the system, but any OCPP certified charger is able to talk to our system. At the same time, with vehicle telematics, we are looking at how do you integrate with the leading telematics players are there. So you are able to create an ecosystem around the vehicle, around the chargers, and then the operations. And the value is not just coming from the data itself, but in how do you use that to build the operational excellence for that customer, right? What are the key KPIs that this customer is focusing on, and how can we help him drive that? Is it daily driven miles? Is it cost per charge? And that actually adds a value, right? And these are enablers, and we need it, and that's a foundation on which we build the higher level value.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question from the app, if it's a quick answer. What is your view on grid constraints? Ability for the grid to cope given the much larger kilowatts for the CV segment, even with storage and PV in place, we will need grid upgrades, or how do you see it?
Okay, so as I said, this is, you will not set up megawatt charging parks in a day, right? So it will be a journey, right? So, but we are telling our customers, look at the mid to long term and say what is necessary for your operation. And here software helps as well, right? By looking at the operations, we are able to tell you don't need a 2 megawatt connection, maybe it's sufficient with a 500 kilowatt connection, right? You can run 10 vehicles instead of running 20. And we have shown it in concrete examples that up to 50% less grid infrastructure is necessary when you have already software planning for your daily operations. But I think as we go from starting initial electrification to full fleet electrification, obviously it is necessary that you have the grid there, right? You need to set up the necessary infrastructure that you want to set up a depot. And this is where it is getting interesting. I come back to my shared depot concept. Not everybody will need to set up their own depots, right? The large vehicle, like if I have a fleet of 200 vehicles, then I will set it up. When I have set up for myself, then I see there is opportunity also to open up for individual drivers or companies that have just 2-3 vehicles for themselves. And then obviously there will be the long-haul public charging piece that companies like Mylens and Mayer and others are trying to do, where there will be public charging spaces that will be necessary for them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Smaran from eMobility, and thank you everyone for your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.